A warm welcome to How Do Men, a podcast with the ambition of building conversation, co-learning, and co-creation in order to find solutions, tools, and concrete tips for the modern man. And today I'm here with none other than Nils von Heijne. Nils has a remarkable journey behind him, transitioning from being a business student, actually from the same school as me, and a serial entrepreneur to today he's exploring the intersection between shamanism and the world of business and the corporate world. Nils has a tendency to be an early mover. He was the first to create a social media marketing agency in the Nordic countries, one of Sweden's first VR/AR game studios, and has also been an early adopter in electric vehicles and blockchain technology. Now he's at the forefront of creating regenerative business forms, among other things, through Innerworks, a transformation lab and studio that creates startups, tools, and models for regenerative entrepreneurship. Wow, almost missed how to pronounce that, but that's definitely a topic we'll be going deeper into today. First of all, Nils, amazing to have you here. Welcome.
Thank you. Sorry for putting you through that mouthful of an introduction. Thank you. Thank you for that.
Well, it was an honor, and it's also just seeing. I remember the first time you and I connected, and how, in many ways, I felt a similarity to you in your ability to move and shift through life, and looking at opportunities, and not being afraid of jumping between perhaps not always apparent or obvious take obvious steps, and rather just seeing yourself as, I would say, a product of all your previous experiences, and is constantly evolving in that. And I remember then, just when reading this, I was like, yeah, of course, this is your journey. And yeah, I'm really excited to have you here.
Super excited to be here. Thank you for inviting me, Fabian.
Mm. Well, we're going to start the podcast, or the episode, in the same way we always start in this podcast, which is to talk about manhood or manliness. And the question is, what does being a man mean to you?
Mm. That is not it's not a simple question for me to answer. I realize as I hear the question and allow it to kind of sink in. Um, I think for me it means many things. Um, on the one hand, to me personally, it means that I'm representing a certain energy in the universe, a half of a duality, where the other half would be a woman or womanhood. And um, to me, what that means is actually just, honoring that I am half of a whole, so to speak, and that the interaction and the energetic interaction between those parts of the whole, those dualities, those polarities, is important. I think that's the main thing for me. Actually, I feel that it's important.
Hmm.
That's one aspect of it, and then I have another, which really just goes into my own personal life experience of being in this body. Is that it took me quite a while to feel like a man, and I still rarely feel manly. I don't feel like a woman. I'm not, considering a gender change or anything like that. But growing up, I was always a small boy. I was always tiny. I was always the shortest in my class, and I still consider myself. There's a memory in me that tells me that I'm short and tiny, even though I'm pretty tall today. I mean, I'm like 1 meter 86 centimeters, which is not short by any means,
No.
but I still see a short person when I look in the mirror. It's very interesting how that happens, how it's so deep in my brain and such a deep part of my story. Um, that it's not triggered easily that much anymore, but in certain contexts or situations, and or for a pretty big chunk of my life, I've always felt, not very manly, not like a man,
Mm.
but kind of like a boy and then a young man. And I still like I notice I'm 41 now. I notice that my mentality is still a young man, like growing into something. Uh, I think I will feel fully like a man at some point because there's a clear direction. Um, but for me in my life, I think that's when, I'll be some kind of elder in my, 60s, 70s, 80s. I think that's when it's going to kick in for me.
Mm.
I don't know, but that's what I'm sensing at the moment. So those are like the two things that are popping up in me, both kind of the dualistic perspective on things and the interaction between opposites, and the other is just for a long time I thought it was very important, or I felt I felt like I was worth less somehow because I was less manly. I don't feel that anymore. I feel like um, I'm quite obviously who I should be in this moment, and I'm an expression of manhood, which is very much my own, just individual expression of what that means, which I'm not really sure what it means, but I'm exploring. Right? It's a
Well,
very long answer.
well, I'm thank you for the answer, and definitely hear you there with valuing and cherishing the uniqueness that is you and the duality together with the feminine or persons with strong feminine essences, which tend to be women, right? But I'm definitely curious to nitpick a bit more there when you say manly, because I'm always I felt that I almost picked up a sense of the stereotypical macho manliness. Is that what you're referring to when you say manly, or what would be some characteristics that you define as manly?
Yeah. Well, I think I'm holding multiple perspectives here. But when I speak about my memory of growing up and feeling like a boy rather than a man,
Yeah,
then that's definitely that boy's interpretation of the world around him
yeah,
and trying to fit into it. And especially like the defining years for me were like age 12 to like 16 or something.
yeah.
And that's when my self-esteem was really the worst it's ever been so far in my life. And I was really tiny. And exactly at that age is, um, it seems at least that the manliness of boys becomes more celebrated. Yeah,
Mm,
if you're bigger, if you're stronger, if you have more of an authority, if you are more extroverted, or
yeah,
take more space, that is looked up to or celebrated. And it's definitely a memory that I still have with me. So my mind today, I don't define manliness like that, like the stereotype, but I have a memory within me in my being of that. And it sometimes pops up. I've realized that it's not my journey to become that. I don't want to become that stereotype. And now I have more of a relationship to it, but I can still, whenever I interact with manliness as defined, like, the stereotypical man, strong, doing physical things. uh, um, I noticed that that memory is reactivated within me, and I'm still kind of learning how to interact with it and understand what I'm supposed to be learning from it.
yeah. I mean, I'm excited about this conversation so far, and how, because we've started the conversation, every conversation, with the question, and especially having had many people in the studio so far with much weight in the world of men's work. There's a relatively clear picture being pointed out or painted of mature masculinity, usually around the topics of thriving in responsibility, leaning into service. Of course, you have, the assertiveness, a groundedness, a sense of leadership, not being afraid to cut through bullshit when necessary, and but also highly in tune and tapped into his feminine, tapped into the vulnerability, the heart, the openness, and somewhere along those lines is where so far in this podcast we are defining what a man is, and but it's interesting to hear, especially from a person uh, like you that you know has, it seems like at this point, maybe still carrying a bit of the alpha male idea connected to, the cocky, the bulldozer, the man's man, the bully at school, what all of those things. Um, I'm curious, have you done, because I know you've done a shit ton of work in many ways. Have you done much men's work, and or like done work together with other men, like focused on the manhood thing?
Yeah, I have. It seems like I'm just circling through various perspectives of works. I've been part of a man's group for a while, and then I've also done um, no, it's just slipping my mind. The new warrior training with
Mankind,
mankind.
yeah,
Yeah,
amazing,
the first one.
yeah.
Amazing stuff. Um, so I've done that. I mean, for me, it's why I began by talking about it is because I still have
Mm,
unhealed or unresolved. Like there are bits and pieces left from the Nils that was especially around 13, 14, 15. Like there's a lot of stuff um, from that period is kind of defining my life, not in a negative sense, but it's like there's fuel there. Like
mm,
there's sadness and there's fear and there's worry and there's a lot of energy, but also a lot of love and wanting to
mm,
being able to express love, having someone to express love towards, and being allowed or able to create what I wanted to create in this world. Like there's a lot
mm,
that comes from that specific age in me. So that's why it's still so relevant for me, because I notice how it's fueling me, and in um like in the deeper realms of plant medicine work, I've revisited that
mm,
that version of myself quite a few times, and there's still stuff there. Uh, and I see that, I think I already said it, but I see that both as, yeah, there's things for me to learn and heal, but there's also energy there that I can use, that I can create things from. I'm also noticing, like in the potential definition that you shared, or what you've been finding so far, or the descriptions that you've been finding so far in the podcast, is I actually, just hearing you say those words, uh, I would apply more or less exactly the same words to the modern day woman at this time in the story of humanity, with the only exception that instead of being in touch with your feminine side, being in touch with your masculine side. But taking responsibility is also, it's not just a male thing in my mind, it's a human thing, and all of the other things as well. So I don't see it as that different. I think for me, my current sense making of why men's work in this topic has become so uh, vivid and relevant for many people in recent years is because there seems to be an ongoing shift in humanity at large, and in that, it's more like we are being invited to step up or coming to deeper connection with our own humanity. And if I'm a man, then that's a part of my humanity. And if I'm a woman, then that's a part of my humanity. And instead of kind of shying away from it, it's integrating it and allowing it to be there. So I don't know. To me, it's just like it's a human thing
mm.
rather than a men's thing or a women's thing. Um, yeah, that popped into my head as I listened to you.
Mm. I like that a lot, Ashley. Thanks for bringing that up. And ultimately, I mean, it easily becomes that we talk a lot about what a man is because it's called How Do Men, right? So it's all obviously going to be circling around the area for now. As we're moving further into it, I'm already planning to bring in um, female relationship coaches and especially female men's coaches to get a much more I was going to say nuanced perspective. But I like what you're saying there as well. Like ultimately, we're very much the same.
Yeah.
We
But maybe I think we need this though. I think we in this what to me at least seems to be an ongoing reconnecting process. Like we're reconnecting with with what it means to be human, reconnecting with the planet, reconnecting with why we're here, and so on. I think the most simple way to do that is to actually do it through the roles and the personas that we're already carrying around.
Hmm.
So I can see that clear link. If we just say, "Hey, we're just human," but at the same time, I walk around and I'm kind of engulfed by my personas. So like I'm a man and I'm an entrepreneur and I'm a creative and I am this and I'm that and I'm blah blah blah. And
Mhm.
you can argue that you know those are just experiences rather than truths. But that to me becomes a very rational portal into looking at oneself. So instead of just saying, let's just look at me, you have to kind of, maybe you don't have to, but it seems to me that kind of the deeper you go into the spiritual realm, the closer you come to exploring source or what existence even is in those very kind of philosophical and profound and deep questions, the less important the personas are. But since not a lot of people are interested or meant to be going that deep into existence, then an entryway to explore myself could be through the persona that I'm already carrying around. So there's something there that just kind of starts circling for me, that it makes total sense that
Hmm.
even though we can argue that we're just human or we're just existing or we're just source or we're just energy or whatever, uh, these personas allow us to connect with ourselves and each other. And in the shift, like when I start showing up differently as a man because I use that persona to understand something about myself or shift something or heal something, then the world around me, kind of the world around me that connects to me as a man shifts as well. And when I show up differently as an entrepreneur, then the world around me that is connecting to me as an entrepreneur shifts as well. So it has value, these all the personas, the identities that we dress ourselves in.
Love how you're touching upon that. Thank you for bringing that in. And I mean, seeing the exploration of what a man is as just ultimately a path to home, in the same way that any religion is a path to home, and plant medicine is a path to home, and entrepreneurship as well. I mean, if you look deep down into what, for instance, the creation, and we're going to tap into that further down the line, the creation of a company is, it's just, I began to explore that more and more. It's a highly inner development path or spiritual path to create. And the different challenges that come along the way are, as any challenges in the life, they're put there for us to mature and grow through them. So yeah, I like the perspective that you're bringing in there. And get on the man wagon and do your thing, or get on the Buddhism. It's all gonna
I like
come
the
come to the
manly.
same conclusion ultimately.
I saw a man wagon when I found that rolling by, filled with
Yeah.
men on the man wagon. Get on the man wagon. Where are you going? We don't know, but we're going there.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Well, I want to bring us back a bit to what you shared with your wound there, from when you were a bit earlier in your life, because that's something that's not often talked about. It's often talked about the masculine wound that women carry, as in, through the many unfortunate events throughout upbringing and the way we were raised. Many women have ended up in hurtful situation connected to men, and because of that, not trusting of men subconsciously, and this plays out especially not trusting masculinity, whatever that is. Yeah, enough, which causes a lot of imbalances in a relationship. But in the same way, I would say that most men don't have a masculine wound, starting with, you know, as many of us have gone through a sort of a sense of a lack of a healthy fatherhood connection, starting somewhere along those lines, and then growing up with very, very shallow connections, a you know, sports community, locker room vibe there, and then growing further. And I really realized that as well when I came into my first men's work thing. I was super triggered. I was just like being angry with everybody there. I was like, who are these idiots? And even though I knew they came for the same reason, and I realized that up until I was 32 or 31 or 32, I never really had a man properly ask me the question, like, how are you? Like, really? Not a single time. Throughout all my, so I just never had those type of engagements. I mean, I had some, but never really to the depth that I felt that I needed and that I think most men need. So I also had a deep masculine wound. Like, I wasn't trusting the masculinity at all. And it's taking me some time to, now I do. Now I love it. Now I love the man wagon. But it's really a thing for many men to look at as well, not only women.
Yeah, I agree. And thank you for sharing that. And for me, it's so hearing you say that, it also brings to life memories from that specific age. When I look at it now, like I can see kind of what played out, because there are a few distinct experiences within the same 1 or 2 years, like that I clearly remember. So one was the shift. Like I was really good at sports, but I was small, and I was, uh, when you're around 8 or 9 or 10, I was also popular among girls. But then something shifted when we hit our teenage years, and I was small. I was still good at sports, but I was small. And when love, or the search for love became, started really happening. Before that wasn't really in my world. It was something. It was that, but in a very childish expression, right? But when kind of the boyfriend girlfriend thing started happening in my circles, I wasn't. I didn't experience myself to even be kind of on the table for that. And there are two distinct moments that I remember. One is that connects to this topic for me. One is, I remember being probably 14 and crying in my mother's arms, saying that no one will ever love me, and I have so much love to give, but no one, like no girl, will love me. I was kind of convinced of that in the moment. Um, and I also decided, I have a few of these moments in my life where I remember making decisions that later came to define many years of my life. And the decision was to like, if I found a girlfriend, I would be the best boyfriend ever. I remember making that decision, which was, over time, I realized that was not a super healthy decision, because it led to a lot of other patterns down the line where I, was overly pleasing and overly supportive in some of my earlier relationships. And
Hmm.
then I also connected to kind of the masculine wound. I was also around that age. I was jumped twice within like 2 or 3 months by other guys. I was robbed by 3 guys followed me. I didn't know them, and they jumped me and took my phone. And then like 2 weeks later, some other guys jumped me and a friend and started picking a fight basically. And those things mashed together really became a wound, like
Hmm.
a deep wound. I felt lost. I didn't feel strong. I felt kind of left out of the male female interplay that started happening um, around that age. And it's also, I think it's when I look at my life now and what I'm doing and putting my energy towards, it's so much that 14-year-old who wants to express the love that he has. So I can see that in my current entrepreneurship is that the love of my children and of life and of coming generations and this planet and so on. It's like it's so much now becoming expressed through what I'm creating. So in a sense, I'm deeply grateful for having had those experiences of being so sad, of knowing that I have so much love in me and I can't express it because it is now what is being expressed through me in my interactions and in the work that I do.
Well, thank you for opening up there, Nils, about those experiences, and it moves me to hear you share about them, and I it made me sad, and it helps me to connect with things that I've been through as well. And I like how you're also seeing that much of what you do today is a trauma response. Like we're like an effect, like whatever we're doing today is still very much a effect of what happened, when we were between 0 and 14 or 0 and 20, and
Yeah, it's like we had a couple of like big bangs and we're still expanding from from those
exactly,
moments.
exactly, and yeah, just seeing it for what it is, and instead of trying to fix it, just it's like it's part of your journey. And I think it's also, I mean, I feel at the moment we have a really established a nice connection here, and I definitely see that we could go further down into the masculine wound. Part of me is like, yeah, we should just deep dive there. However, I noticed a segue in you talking about what you're doing at the moment, and I'm gonna just grab that segue and continue the dialogue in that direction, because it's just too damn interesting to not cover more. Even though I wish we could continue spending time with the masculine wound, I think we're gonna have to go through that many times over this podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we might circle back. We'll see.
Yeah, we might. So, what's happening? What is regenerative entrepreneurship? And also, obviously, I'd love to learn more about, and if you can teach the listeners about corporate shamanism, or how you work with shamanism and business.
Thank you. Thank you for asking. Let's see where to begin here. Well, let's start with my take on it's not that important what label you put on it, if it's, regenerative business or conscious entrepreneurship or anything like that. What it means to me is to allow business or the expression of business, which, could be companies or your career or whatever you want to put into the word business, to explore how that can be part of creating conditions that are conducive to life. Or another way of saying the same thing for me is, how can business be transformed, or how can business be done in a way that it's creating the world I want my kids to live in.
Hmm.
So it's a shifting of perspectives, and it's a transformation of where energy gets directed in the world of business. That's kind of the big lens that myself and people that I'm working with are using to approach this. And we're also looking at business as an expression of humans, of something human, and an expression of life. And if you narrow down and talk about a company, for instance, that is usually a collection of human beings. Fine, there's technology and there's things and stuff and yada yada, but at the core of it, still, it's human beings in a group creating something together. And by just shifting the perspective from the company being an organization to the company being a living thing, an organism, allows us to explore business from a completely different perspective, which allows it to be put back in touch with humanity, with the planet, with life, with regenerative flows and ecosystemic flows. And that's kind of, I'm still kind of just circling the topic here, but then to put that into concrete words, what I'm doing in that part of my exploration is basically trying to transform business from that, using that mindset. And we're doing that in different ways, where we developed an organizational structure, like a legal shape, a legal shape for a company that allows it to honor those perspectives, with a life cycle where we actually talk about why and how companies die and how they can regenerate their ecosystems in the death process, just like everything else is doing. And we're developing various tools, like both complexity navigation tools and coaching tools that are also using this perspective, and that can be used in a business environment for leaders and employees and organizations at large. And we're also, with InnerWorks now, we are starting to explore not only having these kind of the scaffolding and the tools, but also doing it, like creating hypotheses or startups that are not, they're not choosing the focus, here's a solution or a cool idea, let's create it. The focus is a question, like a big question that we want to move towards. And we're applying ourselves to move towards that horizon. Understand that we'll never get there, but if we keep moving, things will be changing, and we'll keep moving towards that horizon. So there's now an entire like systemic structure that's been emerging over the past 5 years that is coming to life, as one of many expressions and explorations that are happening around the world, towards this regenerative business paradigm. So that's kind of one way to start talking about it. And then to me also, since I'm doing shamanic work and have been for also 5 years, since I have those parts of myself, like I have a shamanic part and I have an entrepreneur and a creative, and my mind enjoys finding patterns and creating momentary insights. I am becoming whole by connecting all of these threads within me and tying them together. So in corporate shamanism, the exploration of putting business back into connection with life is a very shamanic thing to do, if you ask me. But I'm also working with leaders and founders and change makers facilitating deep shamanic work. So it's kind of, I'm working with individuals and and structures and organizations and all over the place in this work. And it should be mentioned that like this work has been emerging over the past 5 years, and then a year and a half ago, I burnt myself out. So I'm just coming out of like 15 months of exhaustion, which has been an instrumental part of this work to understand flows of energy and flows of life, and to understand various expressions of energy in entrepreneurship as well. Like it's one thing to just have the go, I have tons of ideas, let's create stuff and go fast.
Yeah.
But there's also something to sinking down into something that's slow and deep, where you can't move, where you can only kind of observe yourself and the world, and learn from that. There's so much, in my experience, there's so much wisdom that we can use in what we create by being in those deeper phases, those more challenging and slowly moving phases of not only our lives but also our collaboration as entrepreneurs. That's a lot of stuff that came out. Where do we go from here?
Yeah, I mean that's a big question, and I like I think I see a very interesting path for us to take here. I mean, first of all, I just want to summarize what I heard, make sure that I picked it up correctly. That first of all, I mean, regenerative business is really about turning, bringing life back to businesses instead of seeing them as corporations, which is sort of like some kind of extra thing that are separate from what we are, seeing it as we are a group. And if we're 5 people in the company, or 1,000 or 1,000,000 people in the company, then that constitutes the collective entity, which is alive, which is the company. And we're then talking a bit about like there's a new business model that I'm very interested to talk about there. I also hear that I'd love if you have discovered or looked into why companies die. Why, if there's a deeper answer to that question. And now also tapping into the shamanistic path here, and how you have learned from your own um, process of being burnt out, understood the importance of, understanding more about how energy works and the importance of stillness and cultivation of stillness. And just as you were saying that, I felt this like longing inside of me, like, wow. I remember when I went for 7 days into a dark retreat in Guatemala. That was stillness for 7 days, in complete pitch darkness. And uh, I just felt a big longing to book myself a trip to Germany this spring, before I have my first child being born in July, to go down and cultivate some stillness. Um, but beyond that, I perhaps, because I think a lot of, like, we touched upon quite a lot of different things. How about we take it from a customer perspective? Like, if I would come to you and say, I'm interested, what happens then, Because I think that can be quite an interesting path to see and understand. What's the typical case look like for you, and how do they vary?
Yeah, cool. Yeah, there are a few different kind of threads in there, a few different ways that people show up or feel drawn into this. So one that kind of the most obvious, I think, is and I'm generalizing a bit here, but it's the entrepreneur, the founder type of person, who kind of shows up at my doorstep and wants to explore him or herself more deeply for whatever reason. They're on this path,
So he comes to
and
you individually first, maybe. Like,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah, so for certain people, it's like that.
Yeah.
So it's not like a linear thing where first one thing happens, and then for some people it is, but to me it's more like different doors that are open. So someone is opening that door. It's like, hey, I am this human being, and yes, I am, an entrepreneur, or I have this company, or I'm starting this company, and I have this kind of drive in me, or I'm a leader, or I'm a, some other kind of change maker, not just an entrepreneur. Also, or I'm something else. It's
Mm,
not just
mm.
the entrepreneurs that show up. And then there's something has drawn them in, some kind of curiosity or just intuition, or they heard me on a podcast, or a friend of a friend of a friend, that kind of thing. um, and there's something there to be explored, and my simpler perspective is that, okay, we're here in this moment together for a reason. Let's explore what that may be, and let's explore, if we're meant to do anything together, what that may be as well. So that's kind of the individual a connector point, and then the work we do, it really differs, but it's shamanic. I would call it shamanic facilitation of that person's journey, which could be, if I just take a few examples from like um, the past few weeks, then I've now I live up in the mountains here in Åre, so I have a few individuals here that I do work with, kind of in the physical space. We meet up and I facilitate. It could be the drum, it could be breath work, it could be energy work, it could be, you know, um, elements of coaching. I never really know what it is, and that is very much the way I work. It's just pure intuition in the moment, and what you could refer to as channeling. But then I also do that online. Like yesterday, I held a session for a person online, and then I also do it asynchronistically. And then if for those who are open to the really weird, I also do it in the dream state, where so I actually do shamanic work while sleeping,
Mhm.
which is a very interesting experience. But that's kind of the individual side, and then you have the other entry point, which is more of the clear-cut business side. It could be an organization or someone at an organization who wants to transform something. So hence InnerWorks, the transformation lab, is that we are exploring transformation and creating various ways to facilitate transformation beyond just coaching, beyond just facilitation. So methods, tools, organizational structures, all sorts of things that can facilitate whatever transformation actually that is needed. So certain companies show up and hire us as consultants
Oh,
to,
yeah. What do you
yeah,
think
go ahead.
creates their urge? I'm just curious to know, like, because I think this is one of those topics. It's because I also work with conscious leadership, and some companies just happen to find and connect with me. I'm going down next week to work with the company for half day on building a basically setting them off on a journey towards personal development. And I'll be doing some connection exercises, some breath work, and I'll talk about the importance of dropping the mask at the office and, relatively going at a relatively I wouldn't say basic level, but just a good grounding foundational level to connect people and go from there. But I'm curious to learn because it's still a relatively new thing. What do you think drives some people to just all of a sudden just contact you? Is it, or is it just that
I
they
think,
hear
yeah,
about it and being referred to you, or
I think you actually just said the word in your last sentence, curious. I think it's curiosity. I think it's something that, I think what seems to be the pattern here is that a person or a group of people have been thinking about something for a while. And it could be, I as the leader have been exploring breath work, or, the shamanic work, or whatever. And I sense that, what would happen if I expand this experience, or bring my company or my coworkers into it. That's like one thing. And then with this organizational model that we have, which is called the RCO, or an RCO model, quite a few people interact or come our way because they've been thinking about similar questions. So it's kind of, I think it's the question that connects us. So like,
Mm,
oh, yeah, we've been exploring this question as well, and it seems you guys, are onto something, or might have something that could guide us on our journey, and then they reach out. And then it's, now with the what's happening at the moment, where it looks like we'll be spinning off quite a few startups as part of this structure. Then it's the people that show up are the entrepreneurial type that wants to create something, and once again have it in them. They've been exploring the question of like, what is purposeful, what is a
mm,
question that is actually important for me, how am I using this energy, like this life that I have in this form, with this energy and this drive, and the experiences I have and the abilities I have, how do I channel that into something that brings about some kind of greater good, or supports the continuation of life, because that question is becoming more important for people. So I think it's just people, a lot of people are exploring these things and thinking about it,
mm.
and then there are different entry points. So it's just like, yeah, it's me, and I want to heal something or find something or understand something, or it's like us, we're creating something, or it's me and this group of people, and we're there are different needs depending on what question you're exploring. And I, looking back now, my uh, the saying that we're kind of moving backwards into the future seems very vivid in me, that I have no idea where I'm going, but looking back I can see, oh yeah, that's actually what I've been doing for quite a few years. It's just create things that could support the exploration of these various questions that other people than myself also seem to be exploring.
Mm. Yeah, it thank you for sharing there, and it makes a lot of sense with I remember when in my previous company that I built and ran for 7 years before embarking on now Scalp that I do. I remember because those were like connected to my cancer journey. I really began to explore these topics myself, and through that experience, understood the power of inner work and inner development, and came at it probably bluntly and arrogantly in the beginning, trying to proclaim, to my colleagues and co-founders, like we gotta wake up and we have to reconnect with our path and all those things. And it was so not very well received because I came at it from a place of telling them, it's like I have this truth now, and this truth is my truth, but it's also your truth because it should be your truth because you're asleep. And those that which is, I think it seems like a inevitable part of this process. But
Yeah.
once I'd healed, or like they had forgiven me from that hysterical approach, I gradually happened or managed to inspire many of them. And we remember that we went to a breathwork session, the whole company. And I remember my CTO, and he was like, your typical CTO guy, probably that's probably not a fair thing to say, but your typical, like a stereotypical CTO guy. Uh, just like remember him sitting afterwards, just like scratching his like head, and it's like I had this like experience of just my jaw was just like a meter outside of my self or something, and he's like, "What the hell?" I can see that I planted seeds in him, uh, and we also then further down the line with more. Then I had more all of a sudden like support because people started to be. And this, of course, once we began to do this work, it started to shift the product and how we talked about cancer and going through cancer and mental health. We stopped thinking about it as, oh, it's this like alien invasion from the world that is there to kill you, but rather like it's probably your body trying to communicate something. Look at something inside of yourself, and how can you use a journey through cancer as a way to um, grow as a person, personal growth, or trauma, post-traumatic growth. It's called. So it really shifted the perspective. And then I had this other. We made a larger investment. I remember us investing like 60 or 80,000 into a connection coach, which ran for 1 or 2 months. And for the whole company, we had a couple of different sessions. We connected, and that created so many. So it's a gradual process, gradual process of evolving. And I'm sure that at some point, perhaps they're ready to take a further step into like, okay, RCO, can we transform the entire organization into something which is just connected all the time. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's Thank you for sharing that. It's beautiful, and I have a similar experience. I think it's inevitable what you're pointing to, that when you have an experience, you're like, wow, everybody should be doing this. Everybody should understand this thing. But um, um, and then what seems to be the natural kind of progression is that it sinks in, and you end up kind of seeing that, well, everything is exactly as it should be, and what I can do is honor my path and be who I'm supposed to be, and then just trust that that will be exactly have the effect that it's intended to have. And it's kind of like the one of the tools that we've been working on is something we call meadow mapping, which is a kind of a meta coaching tool that you can use for individuals, organizations, even nations, probably. And the only thing we do there is that we look at the natural cycles of nature, where plant seeds, and then second something sprouts, and then something's blooming, and then something is withering, and then something is composting, and it keeps going like that. And you can apply that to yourself, like your interests or your career or your personas. You can apply it to a company, to projects, to all sorts of things. Very simplistic, but in our interaction with other human beings, just to, at least for me, just to hold that perspective that, okay, in me, there's a seed somewhere. I don't know what's going to grow out there. Something is sprouting. I'm getting more interested or open-minded to something. Something's blooming, which is kind of like what I am at the moment. Something has started to wither away, and something is composting. Like, I'm no longer this person. I'm no longer interested in that, but there's value in that compost. Like, what did I bring with me? What do I put back into the soil, into my relationship to myself and the world? And so something new can grow. And my perspective is that that's what we're doing for each other as well. Like, if you planted a seed in someone connected to breathwork, and maybe 10 years later that starts sprouting,
Mm.
but you still planted the seed, but you can't kind of force it and just, drench it in fertilizer and be like, motherfucker, like, get there, bloom. And it just doesn't happen like that. And we had the same with previous company of ours, which was this VR/AR gaming studio, which I co-founded with my wife and a few others, and we brought in a lot of these these thought patterns or perspectives into that company. And for some it was great, and for some which is like not there. It was not relevant for them. It was
Mm.
just this weird thing where we held meditations and facilitated um 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 what's it called? I keep losing words today, but um authentic relating practices and stuff
Yeah.
like that. Where, like, for some people, like, wow, this is amazing, and some were like, this was deeply unsettling. Why are you doing this in the office? um, because some of them were sprouting, some of them were blooming, and some of them were not even ready for a seed yet. And that's nature. That's how it is. That's the way everything works, it seems.
Yeah, that's the way it seems to work, and so just yeah, constantly coming back and circling back to this to trust that things are the way they should be, and you cannot force things, shouldn't force things. You can do your best to inspire, and yeah, I imagine many there's probably many companies right now where this like conflicts of interest, where you have these hippie hippie entrepreneurs and like, yeah, let's do this and that, and others just like, fuck you, I just want to work. Like, I have no interest in like connecting at a deeper level with these guys. This is just my workplace
Yeah,
and
yes,
that's
I
it.
find that.
Yeah.
And that's fine. That's fine. Like, we all have our roles to play, and then in the end, that's evolution. Things shift and change, and no one knows exactly what's going to happen, and no one can really control that, right? Like, you
No.
can't decide where the world is going. You can only play your part. You can't convince the world to go anywhere. You're kind of a pixel or a little piece of the world, and you can shift. You
Yeah,
can shift yourself, and then that will shift the world.
exactly.
And maybe some pixels around you will shift as a result, but that's their decision. um, and I mean, that's what you can do. And for me, that's both kind of, it's allowing me to be small and be like, yeah, I'm not that important. I'm this
Exactly.
pixel. But then also to know that, and there's a lot of science supporting this, that, we're actually deeply connected, and we're deeply impacted and influenced by how other little pixels are shifting. And that tends to actually shift a lot of other pixels, but it's non-direct. You can't see it. You can't really point and say, oh, it was just because of this wise pixel that everybody shifted, because it doesn't really matter in the end. You live your life, and that will shift things. The way you live your life will have an impact on the world, and that's your decision how you do that.
I wanna go back to the customer journey there, to see, let's say I've now, reached a point where we feel like now we're here to go like go big now with Inner Works or like with Nils and his gang, and we're interested to try the RCO, something like a substantial case. What are the next steps? You know, what happens? What's a typical?
Um,
What are we actually doing?
yeah, that's a good question. What are we actually doing here? Um, let's see how I would like to answer this at this point. Um, well, it's it's this continued exploration. There are two things that are two perspectives that we hold that pop up in me at the moment. So one is that um, we're not convinced that anything needs to go big. We're actually trying to play everything as small as we can at the moment, and kind of a reasoning, a current reasoning. And I'm going to go a little bit on an offshoot here, but our current reasoning around this is that if you look at the world of startups and entrepreneurs and the world of business, but this is very clear, especially in the startup world, is that the current approach is, or the way things seem to be working, is that someone has an idea for a startup, and that person or that team are the founders. And then the journey is to probably, as a next step, you try to convince people around you that this thing will work. You're basically saying, hey, I figured it out. This thing is going to work. So join my team and please come on and as investors and invest in this unproven solution that I have for a problem, or, you know, a shift or a change that we want to see. And then you basically hustle to make it work. And if you've been on the, you know, behind the curtain as an entrepreneur, uh, most, if not all entrepreneurs, have probably had the experience that, like, shit, I didn't know this thing would work, and it didn't work the way I thought it was going to work, because the world is constantly shifting, and it's not linear. I can't see the answer. So it's challenging, and maybe I even promised, kind of half promised my investors and the press and my employees that this thing is going to work, but none of us actually knows that it's going to work. And then you end up with this, you know, 92 to 95% fail rate among
Mm,
startups. And that, if we use the perspective that you know, business can shift the world, and we have these big horizons or questions that are important for us, like, you know, we want to be able to live on this planet together and you know, be okay, uh, and continue living and exploring life, and how can business support that? Then it, in our minds, in my mind, it doesn't make sense to have this approach where you bet on unproven solutions and you try to convince everybody that you're right, because most of the time you're wrong. But then we have, you know, for a couple of 100 years, we also have science, where, not fully today, because you also have a bit of this kind of pitching world in science, but at least the fundamental idea of science is that you have a big question that you want to explore, and you don't know how to get there. And what you do is you create a bunch of hypotheses. Like, you just try stuff and you try stuff and you try stuff and you try stuff, and then until something sticks. So what we want to do is apply the same thinking to entrepreneurship. Like, have a big question and then just form hypothesis in the form of startup ideas, and then build a prototype and let it interact with the world. And if it doesn't work, skip it. But if there's traction, then you can start looking at, you know, putting funding and stuff, and making, potentially make it big if it wants to become big. But not just to make things big for the sake of them being big, which is a story that is, you know, a
mm,
common story in the entrepreneurial world. So that's one of the things that are coming up for me, is to actually kind of challenge that. And to answer your question, that's one of the steps. Is like, okay, what's a small thing we can do to try something, a hypothesis? Like, if, let's say you have these different scenarios, right? Um, let's say you have the individual that's coming to me and be like, hey, I want to explore myself. I want to heal. I want to blah, blah, blah. You know, I want to become enlightened, whatever it
mm,
is. Then to just start small. Like, okay, what's right? What is here right now? Like, I'm not gonna give you any solutions, or I'm not gonna give you a 12-month or 24-month program. I'm just gonna explore something with you. Take one little step and see what happens, and then we continue and see what happens. That's like one scenario. And then the other scenario is like, You come in and say, hey, we want to have coaching or sound healing or breath work or go do ayahuasca with our entire company, whatever it is. We kind of honor the same approach, be like, yeah, maybe let's just start somewhere
Mm.
and see what happens at every point, at every step. We don't know what you need and you don't know what you need, so let's explore it together. And then the same with the RCOs. Like we want to restructure our entire company to support life, to be regenerative and so on. We say, yeah, the RCO is an approach for that, but it's dynamic. So
Yeah.
it's not one thing. It has a structure to it, but it's contextual. So we're gonna have to figure out you first, like what is actually your purpose here,
Yeah.
and what are your guiding principles, and what are your needs, and what does your reality look like. And then actually I had this conversation with Amit, who is my closest partner in all of this, earlier today, where we kind of saw for the first time that what we're creating, like the RCO structure, the Meadow mapping tool, a bunch of other tools, they're all dynamic and contextual. So it's not a one size fits all. It's not a blueprint that you just smack onto your problem and it shifts things. It's an approach with some scaffolding, and it invites you. You kind of have to interact with it. You have to kind of mold it to your own reality. Um, so you can't take a ready-made solution, which makes it challenging for people, because once then you do really need this curiosity, and I can't convince anyone to use it because I don't know how they're going to use it. Or what their situation is. So it's become this kind of exploring, is this relevant for you? And if not, then at least I've asked you a couple of questions that might plant some seeds, and then you'll find something else that's exactly what you needed down the line. So the entire approach is different. Like we don't know what you need.
Mm.
We're sensing into stuff and we can't convince you to work with us, and we're doing our best to not even pitch it. which is a very in many ways a very different approach, and on a personal level very challenging. That I have the same with my shamanic work. Like for years now, for 5 years, I have not been able to set fixed prices. I basically say, hey, I don't know. No, I don't know what we're going to do.
Yeah.
I don't know what it's worth to you. You'll know afterwards what it was worth. And then if you want, you'll pay me that.
Yeah.
And that's also kind of unsettling when you have kids and a home and bills to pay and stuff. But there's something about that flow, the flow of reciprocity, the flow of energy. There's like, wherever you look in the universe, you don't see a lot of linear energy flows. Like you don't, like the fixed salary in the human realm is a linear energy flow, but it doesn't make sense to me. At least it doesn't make sense because nothing flows like that. But it's scary and unsettling to allow things to just flow and be with it and adapt to what is happening. Now I don't even know where I ended up in this in this. You had a very clear question, and as always had a very unclear answer.
I think your answer was perfect. Actually, I liked it, and I realized that I see really where you're going with this, and it kind of defeats the purpose to say, what's the structure, what's the map. I imagine that there is, of course, perhaps some idea or like some general outline of the way you work. Like we have a couple of workshops. It looks like this and this and this, and then we arrive at a suggestion, something along those lines. But I really like what you're saying there. Like if we wouldn't be good at what we did if we said we knew what would happen, because then in a way we are it's like it's like being contradicted towards our own philosophy here. And I like that in my consciousness teaching, or consciousness leadership teaching, I often talk about stepping away from predict and control to sense and respond. And it's in the third part of what I do, which is focused. It's called think biomimetics, and how the nature just evolves. And instead of planning for, because I remember pitching and running business like in my previous company, and I remember always thinking about these like projections. Like we have 3-year and 5-year plans, and it's like this is insanity. Like, it's like
It's complete
yeah,
insanity.
yeah. And I sit here trying to convince investors that this is a thing, and they must know as well. Everybody knows. Everybody knows that this is not, reality, but we have to still follow the set way of things, in order for it to make sense, because otherwise you come across as a lunatic, even though
Yeah,
yeah,
it's so
yeah,
quite
because
amazing. That's
if I walked in
exactly.
and just said like, we have no clue what's going to happen, like we don't even know what's going to happen next week, we have these ideas, and this is the general hypothesis that we're working towards, and that's about it. We don't know what's going definitely not know going to happen in a year from now. You might know in a week or two, but a year, two, it's insanity. Like so much. If I look back at 2 years from now, I see another world and another life and another experience of life. So that is, but I also see the point there in trying to sell that to, because it takes guts to go there, and it really takes guts to, I think, where it really comes down to is working with, at least that's what I'm trying to work with, is working with like purpose. What is have you really looked and talked about? I mean, there are some really cool elements of your typical corporate ship, like vision and mission, right there. A lot of companies don't do enough work, I believe, on actually looking at like this vision statement. What does it mean? Are we aligned? Do we understand what this means? And core values. We all have them, I've seen these like communication, transparency, a lot, courage, boldness, but to actually sit down and really talk about them. And then I believe that if you really go deep with their vision and mission, and your core values, you can let those be a manifest, navigating and adapting through this ever changing experience. But that brings me to a deeper question, which is, I believe, at the core root of many companies today, their purpose is not in line with their hearts.
Mm.
I mean, and I've spent so much time within like impact startups and those type of companies, and there's a trend in building a company that wants to change the world, and it looks cool, and it's easy to raise capital, and you end up on Dagens Industry, front pages because I raised capital. But all of that is just a hidden shadow mission for many, maybe 90%. It feels like to me, and I believe that doing this work that you're talking about is frightening to people, because at the core level, they will realize that this thing we're having is rotten. It's not
Yeah,
real. Like, it's not real. This is fear based, what
yeah.
we're doing. It's just clothes in this idea of that we're changing the world. It's not real.
Wow. Thank you for that, for bringing that rant into it. And I mean, it mimics so much of our thinking and exploration. Where, let's see, there's some things to potentially unpack here. Like to your point, uh, actually a question that for me has become important. Not the root question, perhaps, but in a way, maybe it is. It's like, why do we even have companies, and why do we even do work?
Mm.
So if you kind of take it back, like most likely human beings do work because we want to live. Like it's a way to sustain life. It's like, yeah, we want to keep living. I'm having a nice experience here. There are like kids that I love, and like we're having fun, and I want to keep doing this for a bit longer. Let's keep doing this together. So let's work, because it seems we need food and shelter, or else, this experience is momentarily over and we're gonna die. So let's keep working to care for this experience of life. And then collectively, like, yeah, now a lot of us are working on the same thing. Like maybe we should create some kind of structure to simplify, to facilitate this work. Let's call it a company. That's most likely, in my mind at least, kind of what happened. And then today it's like, why do you run a company? There's so many stories about it. And to your point, it's so many, the shadow or the longing of the individual. And a lot of the companies, if you really look at the core business of a lot of companies today with that lens, is like, how, like, is this supporting the continuation of life?
Mm.
Then for a lot of companies, the answer will be no. Like, yeah, you
That's the
have this
thing.
weird yada yada app with, puts, it's fun, but but maybe it's not actually doing that work anymore. Maybe it's something else. It's creating enjoyment. Fine, that's also a value. But then looking at, once again, to I think what we're both talking about, the forecasting. Like, I have to convince other people that I have the right idea, and I'm being asked to do profit and loss sheets and forecasts, and I'm taking it partly out of thin air, and then I'm finding some relevant data that supports my guesswork. And then the investors, if I'm also exaggerating a little bit here, is that, you invest in the company that is doing something that seems relevant at this time and has a good story. So like, yeah, like, uh, team seems good, relevant topic, and their projection seems plausible. So that means if I invest in this, I invest because most likely other people will invest too. It's not because I'm sure this thing is the right thing, because I can't know. So for a lot of investor minds, it's like, I want my exit. That is my horizon. But it's not if it actually shifting the world or creating the world that I would like my kids to live in. It's, do I get the exit or not? And I'm more likely to get the exit if other people invest in this, if they believe the story. But we all know it's a story, and we kind of jokingly call this snake oil entrepreneurship, where everyone is just selling snake oil.
That's the
and
thing.
and only a very few of these snake oil enterprises actually create the shift um, that I think we're all longing for. So that's one part of exploring it in this way. And I think another question that, at least for me personally, is very keeps being very important in this line of work is like, would I do this work? Would I be creating exactly what I'm creating at this moment if I would not be able to get any payment or any recognition for it? Would I still do it? And nowadays that answer to me is yes. Like fuck yes. Like, this is something that can shift something. This is not for me. This is not for me. This is because I love my kids. That's it. I'm doing this because I love my children, and I want them and their generation to keep having this life experience, and to to live in a world that I want them to live in. Like, I want to, you know, when I die, I kind of want to be like, hey, here's the world for you to just continue creating, doing, being in. And I did my best to make it nicer,
Yeah.
make it, just a little bit better for you guys. And along the way, if I got paid so I could feed myself and just live a decent life, um, that's great.
Hmm. Yeah. This is I can really feel that, having known you now for some time, I feel that what you're doing is real for you. And I feel that, I mean, ultimately, there's so many, like, the moment you go deeper into these questions, there's so many different doors to take. Like, in the long scheme of things, does anything matter? Like, but that's always, that's always the path that we could go down to and end up in a whole nother type of discussion. We search and yearn for meaning, and the meaning from your point of view is being able to give something for your kids to continue. And I find that highly honorable meaning. Even though it might not have any meaning, it's still wonderful to just listen to it and to see. And I'm so inspired by entrepreneurs like yourself who you're in the arena. You are doing something, you're creating, you are trying to actually be the change and create the change in the world. And so for that, I'm just so thankful to to you, and all that is to come, I'm already thankful for in in your line of work, and hopefully in our line of work together at some points. Um, and I want to gradually start to bring it to a close because I feel like we've, gained a lot of ground together, and I don't want to water it down. Uh, but I'd love for you to maybe check out what's happening in you. Where are you at? Have you had any learnings from the talk?
Ooh, wow. I'm in um I'm in a very strong um emotional and energetic moment thanks to this conversation and thanks to you. Um I both I'm both moved by your words, and I also have this full body energetic reaction where I just feel life. And um I kind of knew interesting, I kind of knew this would bring me back to my 14-year-old self. I didn't know how, but now I see it. I sense that I would end up back there. And it's so evident for me that that 14-year-old boy who just wanted to express love, you know, share the love that was inside him, that's still inside him in this um, interestingly enough, flipped numbers. Instead of 14, I'm 41.
Hmm.
Um, 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 that my I am doing that. That's what I'm doing. I'm expressing love through entrepreneurship, and I think that is potentially a question. Um, it's for me at the moment. I'm realizing is the important question. Like, how can I express the love I am here to express through my interactions with the world, whether they be how do I show up when I interact and speak to people, or through what I'm creating, whether that is a song or a company. Like, am I allowing that love to just shine through? And can I keep that as pure as possible and just allow it to come through, and notice the fears and the worries and everything else, the sadness, all of the emotions that in my world are connected to love, are actually expressions of love. Um, but just shine, just shine throughout your life from that core of love that we all are, that everything seems to be. Um, no matter what the story is, or the context, or the expression, or the persona. Thank you, Fabian, just for bringing me to this moment. It's profound. I'm very, very grateful.
I hmm, I just had this image, the final scene in the third Matrix movie when they
You have
fight.
to remind me. There's
Yeah,
so many Matrix movies.
yeah. When they fight Mr. Anderson and Neo, and Mr. Anderson, like, they're in this like hole in the ground, and Neo just keeps getting up. He's like obviously beaten already, but he keeps getting up. And Mr. Anderson is like not understanding, like, why do you do this? Like, it doesn't matter. Like, why do you even care? And Neo is just like, because I choose to. And that's it. And that's just something that came to me when you were talking. So I wanted to give that to you. With that, coming to a close of a beautiful conversation. I'm sure we'll have many in the future as well. But for now, we're leaving it here and sending it off into the rest of the evening up in order.
Thank you. Thank you for facilitating and hosting this and for inviting me.
Thanks.